Goodness, that radiant ideal we so often chase, glows like a distant star in the moral firmament. Bright, guiding, seemingly untouchable. Yet, if we dare to look closer, we find that even stars cast shadows. This is the paradox Niccolo Machiavelli, that infamous sage of realpolitik, unveils with unsettling clarity. The dark side of goodness. It is not that virtue is a lie, but that its light is often wielded as a weapon, its purity a mask for power, its benevolence a carefully staged performance. To navigate this terrain is to step into a twilight realm where morality and pragmatism dance in uneasy alliance, where the saint and the strategist share the same shadow. Machiavelli's lessons force us to confront an uncomfortable truth. The world does not reward goodness in its unguarded form. The prince who clings to idealism without cunning is a lamb among wolves. The leader who cannot bend virtue to necessity is doomed to be outmaneuvered by those who can. This is not a call to abandon ethics, but to see them as they truly are, shaped, contested, and sometimes corrupted by the forces that govern human affairs. Like a river that carves its path through stone, power flows where it will, and those who refuse to acknowledge its currents are swept aside. Yet, this is not merely a political revelation. It is a mirror held up to the cosmos itself, where light and darkness are not opposites but intertwined forces. The same duality exists within us all. The noble intentions we proclaim and the quiet calculations we conceal. Machiavelli's genius lies in stripping away the illusion that goodness is ever pure, revealing instead its strategic dimensions. To wield virtue effectively, one must understand its shadows. To grasp the dark side of goodness is to enter a labyrinth where every turn reveals another facet of human nature. One that Machiavelli, with his unflinching gaze, mapped with precision. At its heart lies the tension between appearance and substance. The delicate masquerade where what seems virtuous must sometimes cloak what is necessary. The prince, in Machiavelli's vision, is not a paragon of untarnished morality but a sculptor of perception, shaping reality as much through illusion as through action. This is not deception for its own sake, but survival in a world where power favors those who understand its hidden grammar. Consider the paradox of cruelty and mercy. A leader who is too merciful, who shrinks from necessary violence, allows chaos to fester, breeding greater suffering in the long run. Conversely, the ruler who wields cruelty efficiently, but sparingly, may secure stability where endless compassion would fail. Here, goodness is not measured by intentions but by outcomes, a calculus as cold and precise as the turning of celestial gears. Machiavelli forces us to ask, is it better to be loved and vulnerable, or feared and secure? The answer, like the edge of a blade, cuts cleanly through sentimental illusions. Beneath this lies another revelation, the virtue of adaptability. True virtue, in Machiavelli's world, is not rigid adherence to dogma but the ability to shift with circumstance. To be a lion when facing wolves, a fox when navigating snares. This is not moral relativism but a deeper realism, an acknowledgement that the world is fluid, and rigidity is a kind of folly. The dark side of goodness, then, is its malleability, the way it can be stretched, reshaped, or even weaponized by those who understand its power. Yet perhaps the most unsettling theme is the necessity of betrayal. Machiavelli does not glorify treachery, but he recognizes its inevitability in the pursuit of power. The prince who refuses to betray will himself be betrayed. For the Game of Thrones is not won by those who play by fairytale rules. This is the shadow cast by the light of trust. The knowledge that loyalty, too, has its limits, and that the moral high ground can be a fatal trap. To grasp the dark side of goodness in its fullest, most resonant form, let us turn to allegory, the language of timeless truths. Imagine a gardener, devout in his care for the land, who believes that virtue alone will make his garden flourish. He waters his plants with devotion, refuses to prune the weak for fear of cruelty, and shuns all poisons, even as blight creeps silently through the soil. His goodness is absolute, his hands clean. Yet when the storm comes, as storms always do, his garden is the first to collapse, its roots too shallow, its stems too frail to withstand the tempest. Nearby, another gardener thrives. She too loves her garden, but she has studied the storms. She prunes ruthlessly to strengthen what remains, uses poison sparingly to save the whole. And when the winds howl, her garden bends but does not break. This is the essence of Machiavelli's lesson. The world is not a gentle nursery but a living, shifting battleground where forces beyond our control, ambition, chaos, the hunger for power, demand more than passive virtue. The first gardener embodies the tragedy of untested goodness, the kind that mistakes purity for strength. The second understands that true stewardship sometimes requires dirty hands, that the preservation of the whole may demand the sacrifice of the part. Hers is a moral calculus, not a moral compromise. The storm, of course, is more than weather. It is the inevitable tide of conflict, the rise and fall of kingdoms, the silent wars waged in courts and corridors of power. Machiavelli's genius was in recognizing that these forces are neither good nor evil in themselves. They simply are, like fire or flood, and the wise ruler learns to navigate them rather than deny their existence. To refuse this stance is not nobility but naivety, a kind of spiritual arrogance that mistakes one's own virtue for a universal law. Yet the allegory deepens. The second gardener does not rejoice in her harsh choices. She mourns them. Herein lies the true weight of Machiavellian wisdom. The dark side of goodness is not immorality, but responsibility. To wield power ethically, one must first acknowledge its costs. The lives, the trusts, the ideals that must sometimes be spent to preserve what matters most. This is the burden of those who dare to govern, to lead, or even to survive in a world that does not reward innocence. To bring Machiavelli's lessons out of the realm of theory and into the pulse of daily life is to recognize that the dark side of goodness is not confined to princes and power brokers. It lives in every decision where ideals collide with necessity. Consider the modern leader who must balance transparency with strategy, the entrepreneur who navigates cutthroat markets without losing their ethical core, or even the parent who disciplines a child with love but firmness, knowing that unchecked kindness can breed entitlement. These are not moral failures but mature reckonings with a world that demands both vision and vigilance. The question is not whether to engage with shadows, but how to do so without losing oneself in the dark. In the corporate sphere, for instance, Machiavelli's insights manifest in the executive who must occasionally wield ruthlessness to save a company, laying off employees to prevent greater collapse, or outmaneuvering a competitor through shrewd tactics that skirt the edge of fairness. The alternative, naive adherence to playing nice, can lead to organizational demise, leaving even more lives disrupted. Likewise, in politics, the leader who refuses to compromise may cling to moral purity, but at the cost of effective governance, leaving their people vulnerable to those with fewer scruples. The real-world implication is clear. Ethical rigidity can become its own form of irresponsibility. Yet this is not a call to abandon virtue, but to refine it. The transformational insight lies in embracing strategic morality, a framework where goodness is not a static ideal but a dynamic force, shaped by context and consequence. It asks, what is the most ethical choice within imperfect circumstances? How do we minimize harm while achieving necessary ends? This is the wisdom of the surgeon who cuts to heal, the diplomat who negotiates with adversaries to prevent war, the friend who delivers harsh truths to save a life. The final call then is one of awakening, to recognize that true virtue is not innocence but wisdom. It demands that we open our eyes to the complexities of power, human nature, and consequence, and that we act not from fear or cynicism, but from a deepened understanding of what it means to be effective and ethical. Machiavelli's shadow lessons are not an indictment of goodness, but an invitation to its maturation. To walk this path is to trade the comfort of black and white morality for the nuanced mastery of the twilight, where the light of virtue shines all the brighter for its willingness to confront the dark.